Hello and welcome to the I Am Woman project, where every week we have deep, thought-provoking and interesting conversations with thought leaders, change instigators, rule breakers and creative minds who think differently, sparking creativity and inspiration. Our special guests on our show cover a variety of topics just for you, and they share their personal stories to inspire, motivate and empower you, our listener. The I Am Woman podcast is produced for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at www.catherineplano.com. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favourite RSS feed or iTunes. All links are in the show notes. Now let's get into the show. Today we have one very courageous and adventurous woman, Ebonie Allard. Ebonie is a certified life and business coach, a misfit turned Maven, an author and an adventurer who dedicates her days to inspiring and enabling misfit freelancers, business owners and entrepreneurs to feel less and more ah. Ebonie shares with us how hitting rock bottom is the solid foundation on which she built her life. It was when the pain of staying the same became greater than the pain of changing. It is her mission to help individuals live a fully rounded, three-dimensional, successful and self-governed life where they can thrive. She is all about leaning into life's adventurous twists and turns, and encourages everyone to reconnect with their inner wisdom. At her core, she believes that it is our responsibility to shine, to bring our gifts to the world, and to encourage others to do the same. So now let's get into the show and enjoy. Welcome, Ebonie Allard, to I Am Woman Project. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Now, I love the name of your company, the Entrepreneur Enabler. How did you come up with that?
I came up with it, really, it was sitting down and working out what is it that I actually do. And for me, entrepreneurialism is more about seizing opportunity and taking action than necessarily being, someone who owns lots of companies or works for themselves. So it's a little broader than that, but I enable people to do that, to seize opportunity and to take action.
Love it. So Ebonie, tell us a little bit about yourself, just so that the listeners can actually connect with you and who you are.
Okay, so I've had quite a varied upbringing, quite unusual in as much as I've never had a proper, in inverted commas, job in my life. So my first career was in the film industry, and anyone who's worked in that world will know that it's a kind of work hard, play hard thing, and I suffered burnout really quite badly, and it was at the time of the recession, so I decided to set up a company and called My Girl Friday, which was a freelance virtual assistant and personal assistant business. And I started it from a place of debt, and not long after I started the company, I ended up homeless, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But I built this company and I was at rock bottom, so I built it with nothing to lose and everything to gain. And that company, I had a lot to prove, and it grew very quickly. And I, got myself in a house again. I made my best friend my business partner. Within 3 years, we were on the outside doing incredibly well. We were winning awards, having a really nice time. And yet on the inside, I was miserable. I wasn't letting anyone in. I wasn't delegating. I wasn't really feeling good. And I reached a place of breakdown and took myself off to Bali, where I spent 3 months or 4 months in total really being rather than doing, and learning who I was and going through all of the lies and the truths of the therapy and the yoga and the personal development and all the work that I'd done over the years, and really pulling out what was true and what was important. And came back and started the Entrepreneur Enabler, and that was 3 years ago. And I now have a business that not only looks good on the outside, but also feels good on the inside. And really, it's my mission to help people, but predominantly women, to create lives as extraordinary as they are, that feel as good on the inside as they look on the outside.
Oh, I love that. It's beautiful. And what a journey. I mean, going from the whole, I'm thinking like, how would I cope being homeless? What was that like?
I think I need to contextualize it for people. So I wasn't on the streets, and it wasn't for a huge amount of time. I was living out of my car and sofa surfing, so staying with friends where I could. And it was for a total of 3.5 months. And now, as I describe it, I really remember what it felt like to never be alone and to be relying on other people. And that was the hardest part for me. I went from being an incredibly strong woman, someone with a career who solved problems for everybody and who was the go-to person for everybody else, to learning humility, really, and having to ask for help. And so it was not just physically difficult, to not have anywhere to put your stuff and to have to, leave and get rid of all of your possessions and survive, on your own and without things, which is interesting in itself, but also emotionally quite difficult.
Yeah, I personally haven't experienced it, but I can resonate with asking for help. It's one of those things that I find I find it hard to ask for help, and it's why do you think we find it hard to ask for help?
I think it's actually comes down to the way that vulnerability is perceived as weakness, when actually it's something quite beautiful. And if I think about it now the other way around, when somebody asks me for help and they're open to receiving, it's an absolute honor. It's a pleasure to be able to help them. And I just hadn't seen it that way when I was on the receiving end. And so when we're not really asking for help, but we need it, when we're battling with that, then we're also not really able to receive it. And I think that is just a societal thing. I think it's the way it's set up, and I really hope that we can reframe it. And I think the work of Brené Brown and lots of other people around vulnerability and reframing it as something else, something that enables us to connect, will really help with that.
Absolutely. And I think that there is so much more. I mean, I was the same too. I had a bit of a meltdown back in 2011 in New York, and my story just came out over the weekend, and I was feeling so vulnerable because it was a deep, dark secret of mine. And I was having these internal conversations with myself where, I was looking at that, people are going to look at me and they're going to see me in a different light, and they're going to see me as being weak. And I was thinking, well, that is the meaning I give that information. Why can't I look at that as being strong and courageous instead? Because some of the people that read the article had actually sent me emails saying, how courageous of you. And I thought, isn't it bizarre that one mindset might look at that as courageous and another mindset might look at that as weakness?
And I absolutely think if you read somebody else's story, you may very well tell them that they were strong, that they came through that and they showed resilience, and that those are all signs of strength. But when it's ourselves, it's actually linked with shame as well. And that's the crux of it. It's like if you're able to own it, if you're able to be proud of it, if you are okay with what happened, then it's a strength. But whilst we aren't willing really to look at it, and whilst it feels uncomfortable for us, then it becomes a vulnerability or a weakness.
Absolutely. And when I think about it, it's actually really taken me about 5 years to come out and share my story. And the only reason I did it is I think that if there's other women out there that have experienced this, this is what I want to do. This is my purpose in life, is to help other women. And who's to say that there's nobody else out there that had gone through the same thing? And it's exactly like yourself. I mean, you wouldn't be where you are without those experiences, I think those experiences make us who we are, as tough
Absolutely.
as they were at the time.
Completely. You know, don't get me wrong, I don't want to go back there. I have no need to go back there.
Yeah.
But honestly, given my time again, I wouldn't do it any different.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I'm the same. I wouldn't, there's no way I ever want to go back there, but I'm so grateful from that experience, and I embrace that experience. I didn't have any regrets.
Yeah.
So you sound like a very, like I said, you're an entrepreneur enabler. So I'm just curious as to what drives you. What gets you out of bed in the morning and makes you jump out and go, this is what I'm going to attack today?
Honestly, it's the connections that I get to have with people. It's seeing people blossom and make friends with themselves and trust themselves. I recently wrote a book about my journey, and it's also, got a handbook and stuff in there. And there's a lot of incredibly intimate, honest, personal information in that book. And I really battled with publishing it because a lot of other people probably wouldn't have gone to the extent of honesty that I did. And what has happened now, and one of the things that I jump out of bed for in the morning, is the emails that I get from women particularly who have read it, who said, our life stories are not the same, but our experiences are so different. And thank you for sharing that, because I felt like I was alone. And so anyone that I can help with really understanding that they're not alone and that they belong and that there's a place for them in the world, that's what drives me. That's my mission.
Oh, it's beautiful. And when you're talking about belonging, connection, I mean, that's the number one human need. So it's something that everyone aspires to have in their life, in some way, shape, or form. Whether you call it love, connection, belonging, it's beautiful. And if that's your driver, no wonder you've gone from, is it Misfit to Maven?
Yeah,
I love it. So we were talking about that before. So we were talking about the pronunciation. Shall we share that with our listeners?
Go for it. I'm going to make you do it.
So I was just reading about Ebonie, and it says here, author of the book Misfit to Haven, and it's got from argh to ahhh. And Ebonie was explaining to me that Americans say argh to ahhh, which I thought that was quite amusing and quite funny. How did you come up with that title? I love it.
So a misfit really to me is anyone who is too creative, too innovative, too geeky, or just too full of heart to clock in and clock out of a job and or life. And often I have felt like the outsider or a round peg in a square hole. And that was my experience for such a long time. And this journey that I've been on and the work that I do took me to a place of feeling confident and being an expert in my field through the experience that I've been on. And my family background or ancestral heritage is Jewish, and the word Maven is an old Jewish word originally, which means an expert through experience. And so I've kind of redefined my definition of it as somebody who is kind of awake, kicking ass, being kind, and taking responsibility for themselves in the world, but and really owning who they are and their point of difference.
Oh, I love it. That's amazing. So with the benefits of hindsight, what would you have done differently in your life or career?
Oh, I always find that question difficult because honestly, I would do it. I would do it all the same because just like we were saying, because of where I am now and the lessons I've learned and the amount of empathy that it gives me. I'm working with clients at the moment, and the thing that I get and hear time and time again is that I create a space in which it's okay for anything to come up and we can talk about it all, and that they don't feel judged and that there's a place for them. And a lot of that comes from the roller coaster that I've been on and the experiences that I've had, and often the failures, that I've had. Yeah. So if I hadn't experienced that, I wouldn't have the level of connection that I do with people now. So I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with, I guess, a whole range of different types of personalities, and I guess your focus is with working with women, what's the commonality that you find when you are working with women? What's the common thing they come to you with?
It's dressed up as confidence, right? So very often in our first chat, they will tell me that the problem, the issue, or the challenge is a lack of confidence. And when I probe them further and ask, what is confidence? Where does it come from? How do you get confidence? That's when we really unpick what's personal to them and what's going on. And what it really is a lack of trust of their intuition. And I, without getting too feminist about it, I really believe that the world that we are living in is set up in a patriarchal way, and it's very much about doing things in a linear motion and with an external focus. And we therefore haven't really cultivated our feminine muscles, our intuition. And if I can help people connect to their own sense of self and to trust themselves and their yes, their no, all of that, then that's where confidence comes from, because it's an inside out thing rather than an outside in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. And when I think about it, well, trust is such a big word, isn't it? I mean, there's different levels of trust, but when you're talking about trusting yourself, it's actually really backing yourself. And that's one of the commonalities that I see too with women. Predominantly, I work in a corporate space. It's interesting to see women, when opportunities come up, a woman may, or the majority of women that I've worked with, they may hesitate, whereas their counterparts, the male. Their male partners would jump at the chance and then worry about how to do it later, whereas they tend to be a little bit more hesitant. And it is that trust factor. It's about backing themselves and believing that they can do the job.
Yeah. And a lot of that really comes down to a kind of a fundamental question that I ask quite often, like, do you believe that the world, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, this space that we are living in, is a safe place or a hostile one? And all of our decisions really come down to that, because if we believe that we are, and again, like in our bodies and as ourselves, like if you believe that you are safe, and that you've got the capability to pick up the pieces, whatever happens, whatever those consequences are, that you can deal with it, then you will make that move and you'll take that risk, or you'll jump in, or you'll say yes and figure out how to do it later. And if you don't believe that you know how to, then that's where the hesitation comes from. And then we've got a choice, like, okay, well, what skills do you need? And are they, practical, physical skills, or are they more the soft skills, that emotional intelligence, that moral intelligence, or body intelligence?
Okay, so that's actually good advice, because I was about to ask you so when people are self-doubting themselves and maybe not have the confidence, what do you work through to get them to where they need to get to be able to put themselves in those situations?
Really understanding and developing that awareness. For me, that's the key thing. Like, what is the worst case scenario? What is it that you're fearful of? What is the fear and the doubt? And then once we can name it and really identify it, then we can come up with strategies to go over, around, or through that.
Yeah.
And once you've practiced that a couple of times with maybe something smaller and then maybe something a little bit bigger, then your confidence will grow, your trust will grow, your ability to risk will grow.
Yeah, so true. So true. So, Ebonie, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever been given?
I completely can't remember what I said and what I planned this, and it's disappeared. I guess it's to trust myself and to either to trust myself or really to live. Like, I remember being asked once, or somebody telling me, what is the point of life? And the response was, it's to live, so are you. And I think I connect in with that on most days and check in with myself, like, am I really living?
And so when you're checking in with yourself on a daily basis, is that what that point is? It's just that one question, am I really living?
Yeah, like to there's a quote about Steve Jobs where he says, that if for 3 days in a row he isn't liking what's going on or he's not happy in his life, then he'll look at changing it. I can't remember the exact words of that quote, but it really rings true for me. It really resonates. So I really believe that my life can be full of joy and the things that I love to do. That doesn't mean all of it. I don't love doing my bookkeeping or paying my taxes, but they lead to something that I do love, which is the freedom to run my own business and to have a life that's set out in the way that I want it to be, with a lot of freedom. So yes, I do check in with myself quite regularly. Am I living? Does this feel good?
That's good to hear, because a lot of people actually, I think everything with, technology, fast pace, people don't actually stop or give themselves the space to pause and actually check in with themselves. And I think that's where people get really stuck. And the checking in is the only way that you become aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. And for me, that's become a routine. I speak to a lot of people who have very rigid daily routines, like entrepreneurs who have a morning routine and an evening routine, like things that they do every day. And for me, that's a little rigid. I like the flexibility and the flowing of being able to shake it up or change it up. But there is one thing that I do every day, and that's when I first wake up in the morning, I gift myself half an hour where it's just me, where I don't switch on my phone, where I don't look at my emails, and I just do a scan, and I check in with I do a PIES process. So PIES is PIES, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. How am I feeling? And it is not for judgment, not to do anything about it, but just to check in and to have that level of awareness. Like where is hurting in my body, or does it feel good? Like, and how am I feeling emotionally? What's the story that I'm telling myself about the day that I'm about to have? And could I change that? And what do I want for the day? What's my intention? And then I get up and I go about my business.
Oh, I love that. I love checking in with the four types of your body. So your physical, your emotional, your mental, and your spiritual. I love that. Yeah. So, Ebonie, what is the greatest lesson that you have ever learned?
I think it really, I realize I'm going round in circles with this, but it really is to trust myself, to trust my intuition, and that I can do, be, or have anything that I want in the world and in my life, as long as I believe it. And as long, sometimes that means putting in the work, sometimes that means trusting more, sometimes that means getting help, and that I don't have to do it all alone. That was a huge lesson for me, that other people can help me.
And was that when you were talking about earlier on about being homeless? Is that where you're connecting this with, so that you are feeling, I guess, uncomfortable? You were starting to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because obviously you were in a space where you had to ask for help. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely, and I think that was the first time for sure. I needed that to happen to me almost twice in order to really learn that. So, the first time was the shift from the TV industry and the homelessness. That was absolutely having to ask for help, but that felt like I had to, like I didn't have a choice about it. And when I was going through kind of a more emotional and mental breakdown, where I was doing everything myself and building the company, and I just wouldn't let anyone in or wouldn't help because I felt like I had to do it all myself. What has changed since then, and the realization I made, I guess, through that, is that I have a choice, that I can ask people to help, that maybe that could be an enjoyable experience. And if I look back at it now and compare it to the team that I have working with me now, it's just insane. I get so much more done, and it's so much more fun because I involve other people, and it's not just a case of having to delegate in order to get everything done, but it's a joyful experience, and it is really about that collaboration and connection.
Yeah, sure. And when you're talking about getting comfortable, I always say that the only way we're going to grow is by getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And, and a lot of the leaders that I work with and, high performers is they actually seek to feel discomfort. So when they become complacent, they actually look at what can I do to stretch myself so that I become uncomfortable. And this is where they grow leaps and bounds. Yet when we start feeling, because we're, creatures of habit, when we start feeling discomfort, we actually stop right there in our boots and don't move forward. And, we allow fear to consume us. So what is your trick for moving from uncomfortable to comfortable?
I think it's to do it in baby steps. I think there's a real difference between your comfort zone, your panic zone, and your stretch zone. And we want to be in stretch. And I and a lot of other coaches and top performers and entrepreneurs that I know really have practiced and have got good at staying in that stretch zone. And you're in that stretch zone when something feels scary but exciting. And there is some kind of a motivation or incentive to move forward and to take some actions, even though it might feel uncomfortable. In fact, it probably will feel uncomfortable. And if the piece that you are trying to bite off is too big, then it puts you into that panic zone of being stopped in your tracks, where you're in paralysis. And if you can't do anything, then you need to step back and make it slightly less scary for yourself. And that doesn't necessarily mean not doing as much or not choosing as big a goal, but how can you make it more comfortable in the discomfort? And so for me, that often means, working with a coach, or having an accountability buddy, or taking it, doing one bit at a time, breaking it down into manageable chunks. So all of those things that are little tips and tricks to make the uncomfortable more comfortable, not comfortable, but more acceptable. You know what I mean?
Of course. And I like the way you've broken it up too. And I love the accountability buddy.
Yes.
That's great.
I couldn't get by. Like, you don't have to go hire someone, right? Not everyone's in that position, or it just isn't possible for everybody. But everybody can find someone who maybe has a similar goal, or who they trust, or who they want to have some fun with, or maybe just want to hang out with more. And I quite often have what I call a status meeting with a friend. So our only commitment to one another is to catch up once a week at the same time and give her a status report on the thing that we're working on. And it doesn't need to be, you don't need to tell the other person off if they haven't done it. It's not your job to coach them or to give them support and encouragement, yes, but not necessarily to do anything other, just to witness their progress.
It's true, because once you verbalize what you're planning to, what you aspire to be and what your plan is, and to have an accountability buddy, it does create movement. It helps you move forward, so that I do that with some people where we kind of coach each other, but not really coaching. I guess it's like an accountability buddy. But when we catch up, we make sure that we have achieved our action that we set for ourselves in our last meeting. So there's always movement. We're always moving forward, and very much like yourself, we're not there to tell them, or it's good or bad. It's completely up to ourselves. But by verbalizing it and having somebody to keep you accountable to your goal, really helps things move forward.
Absolutely, and often the whole point of this is that it's something new, right? It's something that it's outside of your comfort zone. And so you may not get it right the first time, or, you might have the action that you've decided you're going to take is too big, or maybe it was too small and you could have done more. But you don't know, because it's the first time you're doing this thing. And I have a lot of women tell me about their self-sabotaging, or this kind of buzzword. And really that just means, I haven't done it before. The first time I did it, it wasn't the outcome I expected, and so I'm not good enough, so I'm going to stop. But if you have somebody else there and you're saying that to them, they'll just repeat back to you or mirror back what they've heard you say, and then you'll hear it for real and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I have only done that once. Maybe I'll do it again.
Okay, love it. So what advice would you give your younger self?
Believe in yourself, trust yourself a little bit more, experiment and explore, and go about it all with a bit more curiosity, and be less attached to the outcome.
And that, how hard can that be sometimes? Well, I shouldn't even say that. I'm setting out an intention, aren't I? It's hard. I know that people find it difficult to not focus on the outcome. They're so focused on the having and the doing rather than the being, and it's always the other way around. We are human beings for a reason, and and the focus is always about a bigger car, a bigger house, more money, and so they're chasing their tail, working really long hours and really hard. So they're doing in that doing. It's very much the be do have model instead of just being. What is that emotion you want to connect with? That's and it might be freedom, whatever that may be. So why not be that right now? And how does that play out on your day-to-day basis? So it's one of those things that, to not focus on the outcome. I find people focus on the outcome too much.
The quote that I was telling you about with the monk, with the what's the point? What's the purpose of life?
Yes.
It's to live. So are you. And that's the thing that I come back to, because if you're so focused on the outcome, are you really living?
Yeah.
Or are you just existing in order to create and have, or like you say, be something that as soon as it arrives, you're going to want something else anyway, because that's human nature.
Yes. So true. So who's been your greatest influence? If you could think of one particular person, who's been one of those people that really has been a big influence on you?
My family, and the people around me have been so. I was really lucky, really. I was born into a world, into an environment that was encouraging of my dreams, and so that has been a huge influence, because I believed that it was possible for me, and whatever I wanted could happen. These days, anybody who is being courageous and reaching for their dreams one step at a time and taking action of it inspires me and are influential to me. I surround myself with peers who are on a similar path, doing their own thing, and I really believe that we are like the 5 people we spend the most time with, and so we need to choose them wisely.
Yeah, I agree. So if you had to pick one word that best describes your personal brand, what would be that one word?
I want to say Misfit, and then I want to say Maven. Really, it's Misfit. It's really about doing things in a unique way, in a way that is personal to you, that's kind of slightly outside of the box.
Yeah, and when you say Misfit, I always look at going against the grain, doing something completely the opposite to what everybody else is doing. It's not kind of fitting in with, I think that I think that's my point of focus, is probably my interpretation. So when I think about doing something, I think about how is everybody else doing it. I'm going to do completely the opposite. So it's that misfit. I don't fit in with, I guess, the direction of something.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's not necessarily exactly the opposite. It's just looking at it in a different way. Like, if everybody else is looking at this like this, well, why? And for me, it's about challenging that status quo. Just why?
Yeah. Yes, the famous why.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was training to be a coach, the suggestion is that why is not a question that you ask, because apparently there's a judgmental connotation or a tone to it. But it's my favourite question, because if you don't know why, then what's the point?
I know, but it's I did too, and I went to school. I think it was about 18 years ago, and I did coaching school, and they said the same thing. But now with neuroscience and all of this stuff, now is by getting to the why, you get to the unconscious drivers. And I always talk about the 5 whys. It's one of those things that if you want to get to the root cause of something, you ask the 5 whys. So, for example, if you're working with someone and they come in late, and you say, "Oh, why are you late?" And they'll say, "Oh, my car broke down." "Oh, why did your car break down?" "Well, I just ran out of petrol." "Oh, did you could have called me? Like, why did you run out of petrol?" Because I didn't have any money on me." "Oh, well, you didn't have any money on you? You didn't even have a credit card?" "No, I went out last night and I blew it all on the casino." So, if we don't get down to, and kids are great at it, they always ask, why? But if you don't get down to, and of course you've got to be creative in the way that you are asking the questions, because I'm sure that if you were sitting there going, why? why. They might throw something at you. But you can see that by deep dives, and I always use why. Why is, even Simon Sinek, he talks about the why is the unconscious driver.
Yeah.
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 So, Ebonie, we always, at the end of our show, as we wrap up, we always ask our beautiful guests to give us 3 golden nuggets to give to our listeners. So what would be your 3 golden nuggets for our listeners?
Catherine, I know I wrote really wonderful things down for you, but I can't. I didn't get to save that form because it wouldn't let me, and I really want to share those.
So I can help you on that if you like, and you can talk me through it. How about that? So the first one you had was cultivate and listen to your intuition. You are the wisest person you know.
Oh, it's so true.
Yes. So did you want to add to that, or?
No, you really are the wisest person you know. And that, there are all sorts of techniques and tips that you can discover to connect with that intuition, and to take, and again, we've touched on it today quite a lot, but really about being more and doing less.
Yes. I've got to practice that one myself. The second one was do the work, do whatever you need to do to make peace with yourself.
Yeah. And again, I think it's really the idiosyncrasy between doing and being. It's one of the reasons I love yoga so much personally, because there's, effort and output, but then there's also complete relaxation. And so when I say do the work and make peace with yourself, it might sound like they're opposing one another, but the work might not be doing. It might be more being. It might be, resting.
Yeah. Okay. And the third one was courage is being fearful and taking action anyway.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about that again today. People often say to me, "Oh, you're so brave, you're so courageous," and to me, courageous is an action. It's a doing word. If you are scared or you're fearful and you move forward anyway, that's courage.
Absolutely. Well, Ebonie, it's been an absolute honour and a pleasure to have you on the show tonight. How do our tribe connect with you? How do they find you?
The best thing to do is to go to entrepreneurenabler.com, and or I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Ebonie Allard.
Thank you so very much for your time and for your words of wisdom. It's been amazing. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
Take care.
And you.
Thank you. Bye. That brings us to the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed the show, as it is my mission to reach out and inspire as many individuals like you. And one of the best ways to help us achieve this goal is by giving us a good review on iTunes. It's easy and it only takes about 10 seconds. If you have any questions or special guests that you would like to hear from, please send us an email to support@catherineplano.com.au and we will get right back to you. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter or Facebook @Catherine Plano. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Until next week, please take care.